Elder Park's gates were first opened to the people of Govan in 1885. In 2019, work began to bring its crowning entranceway back to the condition which the community deserves.
Rebecca, this is Isabella Elder.
It's thanks to her that we have the park and the library.
What do you think of her?
I think that she looks like a very nice, generous and kind person, and that's who she was.
I'm just in this park every day, sometimes for quite long periods of time. And there's a lot of regular people in the park that you get to know, get to talk to. So it's actually really healthy to have this type of space for people.
This amazing feel of tranquility. One of those spaces where you can come and sit and enjoy watching people go by. So Isabella's an amazing woman. For her era, she was born relatively wealthy. She married a man who was in this burgeoning trade of shipbuilding. But as I say, she was a woman of substance. She had money and she became a philanthropist. And as with many philanthropists, I mean, she didn't make herself poor doing it, but she still managed to provide the park and provide a hospital and set up medical schooling for women at the University of Glasgow. She funded the library. Just all of these things to ensure that the people of Govan and the people of Glasgow would benefit.
I kind of always felt the park was quite a special place. To come to the park it was like a day trip. It would be like a family day. It would always be in nice, lovely hot weather, playing in the paddling pool in the park and things like that. I loved coming down to the boats and the man shouting, whatever, "Number 9, your time's up, come in." I always felt special, going on the pond with the boats. I would have loved to bring my own kids down and go on the boats with them and that.
This park serves as a nice green backdrop to my childhood. You know, cutting through the park to and from school every day of primary school. Climbing trees a lot, climbing in bushes. When I was a kid as well, I was really into looking at flowers and things like that too. I seem to have come back to that full circle, looking at wildflowers and things like that. And the flower beds were always quite amazing.
Natural heritage was an important detail in the entranceway. Beautiful sunflowers and thistles once stood out proudly on decorative friezes around the pillars. These had disappeared under moss and algae or had eroded beyond recognition. The K13 Memorial was also in a sorry state and needed care and attention to once again truly honour the lives lost by submariners and local shipyard workers. Fortunately, there was a plan to do just this. Central Govan Action Plan is a community-led physical regeneration framework that was launched in 2006. CGAP and its partner Govan Cross Townscape Heritage Initiative have been overseeing investment in the regeneration of Govan Town Centre in what is known as the public realm.
The Central Govan Action Plan is a community-led physical regeneration framework for Govan Town Centre that was launched in 2006 and has been overseeing a partnership that's been investing in the regeneration of the town centre since that point. Public realm is a planning term really for all the spaces within a place that are public, so your streets, parks, civic areas where people meet, pavements. And Govan has the most fantastic and exceptional historic townscape and public realm, which is largely the legacy of the 19th century shipbuilding industry. And it's now, in the most part, over 100 years old and needs a fair bit of TLC in order for it to be sustained. And that's where Townscape Heritage Initiative and Conservation Area Renewal Scheme have come in to provide a bit of investment to make sure that we're making the absolute best of that for the Govan community.
A conservation architect is an architect who typically chooses to specialise in work to existing buildings, to historic buildings. The gates at Elder Park were a combination of cast iron and wrought iron, which is very unusual, and it was a cast iron specialist, Jim Mitchell, with whom I worked during the early stages of the project, who identified that. And that makes them pretty unusual to begin with. As far as we know, the Elder Park gates, there are no matching gates elsewhere in the city. We were unable to find them in a catalogue. Jim did search. He's got access to a lot of the old catalogues. The gates were made by George Smith and Company's Sun Foundry, and he has a number of historic catalogues. Couldn't find them. Given the absence of a drawing in a book or good illustrations, you're required to create a mould in which to pour the molten cast iron. And in order to make that mould, you require a pattern, and you require a pattern maker to make that. And we were very lucky to have Ruth, who's pretty much the only, kind of pattern maker in the west of Scotland at the moment. She's the go-to person to create patterns for kind of work in bronze, cast iron, anything that needs a mould to be made.
If you see any sort of Victorian railings or anything, bandstands, drinking fountains, all of those things, the patterns originally would have been made in wood. And they're just used and kept in a store. The pattern is the original version of an item which is to be then cast in metal. So you begin with the pattern and you finish. The finished product is the metal casting that you see in the park. In this case, the lamp stands on top of the gate pillars, and it has a lantern on the top as well. So this is solid wood, but obviously it's made up in sections, and with reference to the octagonal sections, I cut all these pieces of wood and fixed them together in order to give us this shape. So you can see that the pattern is in two halves, and that's because they'll use two moulds. So these are a really good resource because they have the original drawings. These are copies of the actual original catalogues that people would choose what they wanted from. So I can just reference these all the time if someone wants a particular pattern. Sometimes the customer or the blacksmith will know the number of it, and I can just look it up. And there's ones that I've made that I've marked on. And what I do is I just redraw it up to full size and make it again. So there's all sorts of finials, and these Anthemian crests. This little crest here is actually going to be part of this. So around the little fence that they've got around the base of the lampstand, there's a corner Anthemian on that as well. So what I'll do is I'll just copy it from this catalogue and carve that pattern up so that it matches that as closely as possible.
We receive the pattern into the foundry. Normally it's the traditional timber pattern which is carved for us in this particular manner. From that pattern we determine which size of moulding box it fits into. We then begin making the mould, and the moulds are made in two halves using the green sand process, and then from that it builds up, and we then ram the sand into the mould, round the pattern, make up the mould, split the moulding box, take the pattern out, and that leaves a cavity within the mould. From that, you close the box, then begin to melt the metal, depending on what material or metal you're using. In this instance, for Elder Park, it's predominantly cast iron. It takes us 3 hours to melt 150 kilograms of cast iron, bringing it up to temperature to about 1450 to 1500 degrees centigrade. We then cast the metal into the mould. Metal's then left to cool down, moulds then split open, boxes are knocked out, and then the sand is left to cool down, and then we reuse the sand the following morning. The green sand itself, as we describe it, it's called green sand because it's natural sand. And when it comes into the foundry, we're able to make a mould right away with the sand. We then cast right away. We don't treat the mould, we don't cure it, we don't dry it, we don't do anything physically to the sand. So in other words, we use it in its green state, and that's why it's called green sand moulding. We recast the gates and then the actual railings as well, which form the frontage either side of the gate entrance. So with the final part of the project for Elder Park, which we're working on today, which you've seen, are the lamp posts and the small castings that go around that as well. So the posts have been cast, and it's just wonderful to think to be involved in the history in that goes with Elder Park, and to think now that lanes are a part of that history and that in the next 100 years or whatever. It's quite impressive, so yeah, it's good.
Everything we do in stonemasonry is a set procedure. You might even see carving, and that's not freehand. Everything is centre lines, sizes, templates. So, I mean, for example, we have a template. So the template would actually copy. So we work off the templates. Sizes, we have sizes, templates. So everything's just repetitive. You know what you're doing. The only difference is if you're doing actual carving, I call it actual carving, is figureheads, where you can't actually use a template.
A great deal of planning and specific detail has gone into every phase of restoring the Elder Park entranceway, seeking to best preserve the legacy of the original craftsmanship for generations to come, to respect Isabella Elder's aspirations for Govan's green space, and to help make Elder Park somewhere that Govan can be proud of.
It can be really difficult now to find craftspeople with traditional construction skills of the type that were used in the formation of the gates at Elder Park, so stonemasons, foundries who can produce the cast iron for the gates, the wood carvers that were required to make the patterns to recast the lamps on the gates, and that's because these skills in traditional construction dates back more than 100 years and has been superseded in many ways by modern construction types, and it's really important to know the difference when you're dealing with the historic built environment and its proper kind of conservation, restoration and repair, and that's what THI and CAR's funding is there to do, is to give communities the investment they need in order to appropriately repair and maintain these really important traditional structures that they have in the area, and also to try and promote the continuation of traditional skills within the construction sector.
We're very fortunate that the foundry is a green sand foundry, and it's the old traditional skills which we use for making the moulds. The process itself dates back well before the 17th century, and then it's been developed over the years to where we are now. I've been in the foundry, I hate to say it, but probably since the age of 5, working in it, and just progressed from there, really.
It's important to keep the craft skills in the country because there's such a rich history of ironworks and the sort of special kind of architectural cast iron that we all see around our cities. We don't think twice about it, but it is quite an important part of our industrial heritage, and it feels really good when you get to be involved in a project which is sustaining it.
Things that we make last forever, ultimately, in that when you think of it, so it's good. It's good fun, great deal of pride in that with what we do. So
I think it's fabulous. It's really nice to see that improvement, and also that just bringing it back to where it was. This is not the most affluent area. And sometimes people feel they get overlooked. So it's nice to see these sort of works done in the public sphere to remind people that their area can look nice and that they can be involved in that.
I'm sure even Isabella Elder would have understood that times change and you have to adapt to them, but you want to try and preserve the essence of the original intention wherever you can, and the way to tell whether or not you're preserving that essence is to consult and make sure that you've got people locally who see the park as their park, as their place, they're part of their community, that they're on board with what's happening.
The K13 Memorial, that's all been cleaned, realigned, the stones and that were all out of place and it was looking quite shabby. It looks nice and smart now. To see that craft work and all still being used, you know, it's still people out there that can do that.
It's a really important part of like local history. You know, to have memorials for people who are lost in the K13.
I'm particularly impressed with the K13 Memorial because this is visited at the end of January every year by the Scottish Submariners group, and some people come from all the way down in England and we join them on a Saturday morning in January and have a short service here conducted by the Submariners chaplain, and then the visitors all go off to the boathouse for coffee and tea, which is provided by the Model Boat Club.
Heritage is important to the Royal Navy in general and the submarine service in particular. And there are a number of well-known submarine incidents, and K13 is one of those. It's very close to home because it happened in the Gairloch, where the submarines are currently based. And so we have an annual commemoration. We come here and we also attend the cemetery in Faslane where the bodies who were recovered were buried. I think the best way to describe the memorial would have been tired perhaps and unloved. And I think that the work that's been done has been absolutely outstanding. It looks magnificent today, and we're very grateful for that work that's happened.
Loved learning about it, and so with our, it's our great honour to declare the work of Elder Park completed.
I'm blown away. I'm blown away by the detail. I'm blown away by how much effort has gone into it. But most of all, I'm blown away by how good it looks. I mean, I've been to Elder Park, as you can imagine, over the years, and this just adds such a wonderful quality to it. So I hope the people of Govan, people of Elder Park, really enjoy the effort that's gone into it.
The improvement of the gates, that's a huge thing. It's very much a statement of this is this space. It's announcing the kind of space that you're going into. So it's nice to see something being refurbed that literally is about a gift to working people, to normal working people, which is what this park is.
I think Isabella Elder would be pleased that the park is so used.
I would imagine Isabella Elder would have been a pragmatist and somebody who was very focused on getting what you can done without everything being perfect, and perhaps the first thing she would say is the park is still here, and that's phenomenal that it's been sustained for 135 years, and I think she would be on board to help us make it the best it can be.